Hello again, and welcome to the next exciting installment of the Who Cares About Anime podcast. It's me, your host, Jonny Lobo, the one and only, and of course, as usual, I'm joined today by good friends and peers in the anime viewing and critiquing world. To my imaginary right, I'm feeling right today. To the imaginary right around this imaginary table at which we sit, thank you, Tony, for that visual representation. I've used that ever since, but you'll remember him from our previous episode centered around Soul Eater. Here's Phil.
Hey, hey, hey.
And introducing a mutual friend of ours, Phil and me, Grammar, fun. Anyway, please welcome a fellow FMA fan, Jason.
Hello.
All right, and here we go. And of course, I'm sure my sharp-eyed and sharp-eared viewers and listeners have detected by now the title and the franchise that we are going to cover today, FMA, stands for Fullmetal Alchemist. So here we go. The usual warning, if you have not read or seen either iteration of Fullmetal Alchemist, yes, there is two, I would suggest that you click pause or stop or bow out right now if you don't want any spoilers, because there very well may be spoilers, because we're going to be talking about it today. And to everyone who has seen it, just pull up a chair, pour yourself a hot cup of tea or your beverage of choice, and let's begin. So, gentlemen, let's just start with, as we usually do, if you could recall kind of the when and where, so to speak, of when you first saw or read, if it was the manga first, but when you first encountered Fullmetal Alchemist, what was that like, and where were you at? Paint us a picture, if you will, Phil.
Okay, so what I remember actually is it's gonna kind of be like the last episode. So you and I were in college, and you had just moved from Missouri to Lincoln, and we were watching Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood because we wanted to do research for that little unknown abridged series we did. And when I watched it the first time, I really enjoyed it and I liked it a lot. The only problem I had with watching the series is every time I went to watch it over the last 6 years, I kept getting to like episode probably like 13 or 20, and then my way of viewing it would get cut off. So the first time I watched it with you, but then I took some time away from it and never got it back around to it. Even when we lived together, I just never got around to watching it. And then it was on Netflix, and I had watched almost all of what they had through seasons 1 and 2, and then I was going to watch season 3 and 4, but season 2 got taken down the day that I was going to finish season 2, so I couldn't finish it. And then the way I actually watched it fully was, you should know this if you're watching it, and if you don't, it's not a big deal, but the merger with Crunchyroll and Funimation, so since they teamed up, I was able to finally watch all of it, and I did watch the sub instead of the dub, but I marathoned all of that back in October, and I really enjoyed the series a lot.
All right, fantastic, man. That was the long way round, but you made it there finally, and boy, that took me back. That was some years ago. I don't know if I want that early attempts at an abridged series to ever see the light of day. We'll see, ladies and gentlemen. But all right, Jason, how about you, sir? When and where, so to speak, was your introduction to Fullmetal Alchemist?
To be quite honest, I have quite a bit of history with the series, but I would have to say that it would have been my sophomore year of high school. I can't remember the year exactly. I just remember going to a friend's house, and we were just fucking around playing some video games, and Toonami came on that night, and we watched whatever was showing, and I believe it was the episode where they started the flashback when they go to the abandoned island for part of their training. It was the first episode that I had ever actually watched from the Brotherhood series, and I remember watching it and seeing the beginning of the flashback, thinking that it was just so odd that Alphonse had such a high-pitched voice for such a large character. But I never actually ended up watching it until my first year of college, so about 5-6 years ago now. And it was, at the time, it was completely, like, the full series was on Hulu, so I went and watched Brotherhood on there, and marathoned it in about 2 or 3 days, and because of how little sleep I got, I actually fell asleep during the arc where some of the characters are in that little mine bit after their encounter with Kimberly.
All right, all right. Well, fantastic. And boys, yeah, speaking of early days of college, for myself, that takes me back. I was probably 18 or 19 when I started. I think I saw the original series first, and I'm sure our listeners know that the first slash original anime series, that one, the latter half does not follow the manga as it was not finished at that time. So you have the original manga, then you had an anime series, and then we had Brotherhood later. So I saw the original on Netflix. I think it was some of the early days of streaming there. And honestly, I just said, why not? I'll give it a try. I hadn't really jumped back into anime, so to speak, but now college and had some free time in the dorms, so all right. I click on it. Honestly, kind of the military garb of the Amestrian military and stuff. I thought it was funny because, especially because this Führer King Bradley, looking like an evil dictator. Back in my high school days of marching band, I'm a band geek. I was anyway, and so we had blue uniforms that kind of looked like that, and we had our director had a brown bushy mustache like that, and he proudly touted himself as the quote unquote evil dictator when we were doing rehearsals and stuff early in the morning, and emphasizing teamwork and cohesion and stuff that you need to coordinate doing marching band competition and stuff like that. So he'd say, he'd relish in it. This isn't a democracy; it's a dictatorship, and I'm the evil dictator. And his name was Bradley, actually. So I was like, okay, what is this? I'll give it a shot. But quickly, I was very impressed with the visuals, and upon continued viewing, I was just further pulled into the world. The characters interested me, the setup, the premise, it intrigued me, and I think we'll get more into this as time goes on. But I just grew more and more impressed with it as I watched it, and I actually watched the dub, and I liked the dub. And when Brotherhood came out, I was excited for that. There's a chance to even the same stuff that was the same in the earlier parts, I readily consumed, and then I remember buying on the Blu-rays from Funimation as they were coming out. I was gonna say good old Funimation, and if I were really eager, I could have watched the subs first, but I really liked the dub, and I wanted to wait. It was tough waiting sometimes for those latter installments, but then when they would come out, I would rush out and get them off whatever shelf I could find them, and it was a great time. So that was and since then, of course, I've also gone to the manga, and Hiromu or Hiromi Arakawa is and I think always will be one of my favorite authors now. I'm just so impressed with the world she created. All right, moving on. Let's kind of go further into that. What are some of the things about Fullmetal Alchemist that you really liked, or that really captivated you, really drew you in, and made it so memorable for you? And we'll start with Phil.
The thing that I really liked about Fullmetal Alchemist, which I mean you can say for some series but not for everything, I liked the cast of characters, which also made it very easy to become engaged in the story and kind of become interested in what the characters were doing and what they had to say and everything like that. The other thing that I liked as well was that steampunk-esque setting, with it being in like the 1910s or 20s, whatever it is. So I thought that mix went together pretty well. And then what else I liked about it was also the use of the themes for religion and science. So all that stuff put together made me really interested in the series, and I think that's what I liked about it a lot. So.
All right, fascinating. Thank you for sharing. Jason, sir, how about you? What are some of the more memorable aspects about Full Metal Alchemist that you appreciate or that drew you in?
Honestly, there's quite a few things. I have to say, probably just the whole shebang is what got me interested in it in general. Um, and I don't know why, but I've always kind of been obsessed with like the whole World War II era type stuff, that's kind of like the time period that this is supposed to take place. It's like steampunk World War II pretty much. But there was also the fact that like the take on religion and government and like militaristic society, and like the fact that alchemy is the driving force behind the science in that universe. And then there's also just the characters. Like pretty much each character has their own story throughout the entire series, and the anime doesn't just follow one person in particular or like one small group of people. It follows almost every single character that is actually named, as long as they're still alive, at least. They follow each character pretty closely. And in fact, I think at the end of Brotherhood, at least, they wrap up pretty much every story that they have with all of the characters. But yeah, I don't know, just like everything about the anime is just very engaging, in my opinion.
I certainly think that's a valid response, and I pretty much have to echo that. It's difficult to find something I didn't like about it. For me, I really liked, for me personally, the time of my life that I was exposed to it, starting out college, and you're taking all these theology 101 or religion 101, philosophy 101, and you just get your nubile head cracked open like a hard-boiled egg, and you get all your horizons expanded intellectually, and so yeah, Full Metal Alchemist. I have seen things before it, and I have seen things since it, and in the latter particularly. Oftentimes, I think they really are trying to emulate it, and I can't blame them because I really saw with what Arakawa accomplished was with her, as has been said. I really loved the steampunk-esque aesthetic, kind of an alternate reality, if you will, which is kind of explored in The Conqueror of Shambhala a lot more in the original series. As you said, Jason, with alchemy in our world pretty much being more or less seen as a side note in history, and in many ways a dead end to later branches of science. It's not. It's quite the inverse in this in Arakawa's world, and so the blending of science and religion and philosophy I found very impressive, and how you have in a novel way the of course, transmutation, the ideas of transmutation or evocation, the circles drawn on the ground, calling forth a higher power, if you will. They're not brand new ideas, but I think Arakawa really spun them all in a unique way, and so it's almost humorous when you think of it this way. In our world, there's such a division between religion and science, if you will, to a lot of people, I think, and in this world, it stretches your imagination because in their world, if you kind of think about it, it's almost like they might as well say by the power of Satan, after they draw a transmutation circle and swap out some matter for for a totally different piece of matter, although they also follow a rule of physics in our world. Matter cannot be created or destroyed, so there's an equivalent exchange, of course, as our listeners know. So, and in their world, though, like we look at that and would go, I think a lot of people on the outside looking in would go, that's satanic, or, oh, cool, that's satanic. And, to them, in their world, that's science because it's observable and repeatable. And if in our world, if drawing a circle with chalk on the ground and of your own volition, whether or not you chose to say by the power of Satan or by the power of truth or whatever, or just were able to clap your hands together and pull something forth from seemingly thin air, if it's observable and repeatable, that's science, and that's what it is in Edward's world. And so I appreciate all the characters. Roy Mustang because he's a professional badass. Riza Hawkeye, I always liked Hawkeye. Y'all can keep Winry. No Peyton there, but I always saw a lot more love for Winry. I never understood that. I was always for Hawkeye, but then of course Alex Louis Armstrong. How can you not? I mean, come on. But yeah, fascinating characters, particularly seeing Edward's journey through him maturing and issues with his family, his mother, and his estranged father, and so just everything about it. I think it really did, and to no surprise to anyone who has seen it or read it or experienced it, it really did, I think, set a lot of trends that we are still seeing today, back in the the mid 2000s when it was being released. Well, all right, we've kind of scratched the surface here a little bit, and it has been brought up a couple of times, so we might as well address the proverbial elephant in the room here and bring up the fact that we've got this one anime series here, Fullmetal Alchemist, and we've got this other one that we differentiate it by calling it Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. And so obviously one was completed with Arakawa's blessing, but they had to take it in a different direction because the manga wasn't done and they didn't know how it was supposed to go. So you have that path, and then the alternate path, of course, we got was fortunate enough, successful enough later to get a more quote unquote faithful adaptation to the manga in the form of Brotherhood. So just kind of comparing, contrasting. Have you seen both series? If so, do you like one better than the other? Do you think one's superior to the other? And if you could elaborate on that, why and why not? And let's start with you, Phil.
As far as the comparison, I haven't watched all of the original series, but I've been meaning to go back and finish it. It's just, I do like Brotherhood a little bit more, but I have had this discussion with people before, and it's like, even though Brotherhood follows the manga, you should still watch the original series because there's some things that they don't address, is what I've been told. But I definitely think it's worth checking out either way if you watch Brotherhood or the original. But I do have to say I'm probably more partial to Brotherhood, and part of that's probably simply just because of Al's voice. The difference between the two, I'm more of a fan of the voice in Brotherhood, but that's also because I liked the voice of Krona, which is the same person, so that's nice. But yeah, I mean, I can't really play too much on favorites, but I'm going to have to say Brotherhood for sure. And I do have to say, though, for what the series is as a whole, it is one of my favorites, and I do love it for that. So.
All right, very nice, very nice. Jason, what about you?
I have seen both. I would have to say that I like Brotherhood a little bit more. It was the one that I watched first, and I actually watched that one first because that was the one that I heard followed the manga storyline. And I am a sucker for canon stories, especially if they're as well written as Brotherhood is. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that the original is not well written. I actually kind of like the direction that they went with it, just because it definitely posed some new and interesting questions, especially in the end, which, if you haven't seen it, basically in the original version, the timeline for that universe runs parallel to ours, and the way that they use alchemy is I can't remember how it works exactly, but the energy from blowing up bombs and other shit like that in our world, like during wars, and since this takes place during World War II, the alchemy energies are actually the strongest that they've ever been in the Fullmetal timeline. And it's because of the nukes and everything that's going on in our world at that time. And I just thought it was very interesting the way they had that written, and then there were several other moral questions as well, which Brotherhood also has. But like, I think the way that the original kind of brought those morals into question was more interesting, and it definitely made the characters that sort of committed that sin, the ultimate sin or whatever, bringing back someone from the dead, it definitely wears on their conscience more in the original series than it does in Brotherhood. And yeah, I love both of them. I honestly do. And I actually have the original on Blu-ray since that recently in the last year or two got re-released, and I really hope that they do that with Brotherhood as well, so I can get that too. But I also marathoned the original, and it was very good. I definitely enjoyed it. If I had to go back and rewatch one or the other multiple times and have to kind of shove the other one off to the side, I'd have to go with Brotherhood just because of it being canon.
All right. Very interesting. Very interesting. I hope I'm not a disappointment to any listeners here, because this is one truly, I think, as well, past listeners will probably know, I'm not one to shy around if which I prefer, or even if I adore something that's not fully quote unquote canon, like the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure OVA, and things of that ilk. But this one is really hard for me, and so I like to say I have room in my heart for both of them. And similar to what you were saying, Jason, with the original, there was more of an emphasis on, I think, that moral component, sins. Of course, we have the seven deadly sins featured prominently in whichever version you may consume or prefer, and so there was kind of that personalized aspect to it of someone's sin would beget a homunculus, kind of mirroring that sin, if you will, or that taboo. And then even like spoiler, but everyone should know by now, like in the case of the poor Elric brothers, the homunculus that they helped create ends up in human form looking like their mother, because that's who they were trying to bring back, and so it was almost this kind of divine punishment, or cruel irony sort of thing. And what I also liked about the original anime was the villain Dante overall was not as enigmatic or interesting to me as Father in the manga and Brotherhood, but I really do like how, like a good villain, State Farm is there. Now, this is not brought to you by State Farm. Like a good villain, Dante really, really challenges Edward in a fundamental way. She cuts right to the core of his rule of equivalent exchange. Extends far beyond the context of alchemy for Edward. For Edward, that's his kind of, I don't want to say security blanket to belittle it, but that's sort of his little mantra. That's his lexicon, if you will, through which he interprets the world and reality, and that's fine. We all have those sorts of things. So then we see, in his mind, like him passing the exam to become a state alchemist. He just thought, well, I put in the work, therefore I got the reward. that's equivalent exchange. The others, kids, they didn't work as hard, so they didn't get the reward. And there's a lot of people who, even without seeing Fullmetal Alchemist, I think see the world that way. And Dante really challenges him on that. She says, "You really think that's how the universe works? You really think that," she was saying, your most sacredly held belief is a lie. She said, "How do you know those other alchemists didn't work just as hard as you or harder than you? And you just, being the main character, no, not poking the fourth wall, but being gifted or having opportunities that they didn't, or for any other reason, serendipity, if you will. You were chosen and they were not. You think that has anything to do with the amount of effort you put in?" And that kind of shook him a little bit. And so I really admired that and many other instances that the original did, and also the kind of parallel to our world. I was pleasantly flabbergasted when they did that, and you could see, again, I see that as ambitious, because you could really mess that up if you're not careful. That's one of those things where you could really kind of violate the verisimilitude for people if you're not careful. But the Full Metal anime pulled it off for me, and I think many others as well. Conqueror of Shambhala was a satisfying conclusion to that for those of you who have not seen the original version or haven't seen the movies yet. Shambhala follows the original, and then somewhere before the end of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is the Sacred Star of Milos. They're both worth your time as well. So yeah, that's of course reading Arakawa's manga as well, and it definitely shows in the finished product of Brotherhood that it's more cohesive than the original series, in my opinion, and no small wonder. If you're a writer and directors for the original anime, and you have this blueprint of the early chapters of the manga. Okay, here's what happens. Here's these characters, and then basically blank pages. Okay, you finish it. Like, that would be very daunting, and I think they pulled it off well. So anyway, I think that's pretty much me. It's very middle of the fence, but I love them both, and yeah, that's really hard. It's almost like your children. I can't, or my homunculus children, homunculi, if I were father. But I digress. Well, I've reserved this time here at the end, gentlemen. I know it seems like it's flown by. It always does to me anyway. But I thought I would have this open for general discussion. I know there's so many things we could talk about with this series, but unfortunately, I'm sure we won't cover them all. But we'll start with whoever. But maybe kind of, since we've been going in that order, Phil and then Jason, or anybody can comment on each other. Is there kind of a general topic you'd like to discuss, or more about characters, or more about something else that was brought up earlier?
As far as anything like that with characters and stuff, of course I like the main cast, Ed and Al. And as you know from the abridged series, there's always a place in my heart for Winry, as well as Maze Hughes. And of course I gotta love Hawkeye, Mustang, Alex, Lust, just all really good characters as far as the series goes. As far as anything else, I don't know. I can't remember what it's called, John, but you have that OVA set that we watched where it's kind of short stories. That was definitely interesting to see perspectives of other people's stories that you don't necessarily see in the show. And you get to kind of see other things like that, of like how certain characters meet, all that stuff. Other things that I liked, I guess like memorable moments and stuff like that. I really liked, because it wasn't so heavily on there that you were like, please just stop. But I liked the romance between Ed and Winry. And I think my favorite moment of that almost maybe I was like, oh my God, was when he's walking away in the hotel. And Winry's having inner monologue, and she's like, have his shoulders always been that broad or something like that? And she's like, I think I'm falling for him. I'm like, oh my goodness. So that was a favorite part. Another favorite part of mine, which was Mr. Colonel Roy Mustang, professional badass, dropping it into fifth gear, when he kills Lust and he like cauterizes his wound and everything like that. Like, that was so cool, because he's just like, I'm just gonna carve the symbol on my gloves into my hands, and then I'm going to use a lighter to burn the living hell out of you. That was pretty cool. Other things that I do like as well, which some people can probably relate to this, that the series does, obviously, with Ed and Al wanting to bring their mom back, you can relate to losing a loved one and wanting to see them again. And something else that you can probably, not everybody, but some people can relate with is kind of having like, with Al and Ed and their dad, just having that like resentment against your father or just a loved one. I like that those themes are kind of relatable for people, with the setting and everything. And then something else that I don't know if anyone else was going to bring up, but I know you have the first one, John, but there's the Fullmetal Alchemist game. There's 3 games for PS2 that I know of, and the one that I played a little bit was Fullmetal Alchemist and the Broken Angel, which it was weird to play, but it was interesting that they, brought that stuff over here, which I guess that just means, obviously it was doing well at the time, and that justified bringing over 3 games for the PS2. So, yeah, it was an interesting game, and I would definitely probably check that out again. But that's just kind of my whole spiel on the topic, if you will.
Man, nice. I actually kind of forgot about that PS2 game. I think I still have that somewhere, as well as the OVAs. Those were interesting as well too. Definitely gave you some since they're ancillary and you just have more time that you can not focus so much on the plot moving forward, and you get to see some really cool background stuff like that. I had a few notes drawn up, but is there anything kind of on that note or entirely different that you kind of want to ramble about, Jason?
I'm not really sure. I just because of like the fact that I just love all the characters in general. Just because I don't know, the story is just very well written. I can't really say much else other than that. It was nice being able to see Scar go from this bad guy to at the end he's working together with the good guys, and it's always nice seeing someone or seeing a character that was at one point bad and just flipping the switch. I don't know why, but I can also I feel a connection with Hughes more so now that I'm actually a parent. So there's been
Oh
several
yeah.
times where I've made that. I've made the joke of have I shown you pictures of my son? And it really helps that I look like the character quite a bit too. Well, I mean, not as much now that I'm a bit chubby. But like if I actually were to put work into looking like a fit soldier, it wouldn't be too hard for me to pull off the look. And pretty much the only thing that I can't connect with him on is the whole being dead thing. Which it doesn't matter how many times I watch the anime or which series I watch, that episode just it hits me hard every time. I don't know, it just gets me. But when you were mentioning Roy earlier, Phil, I thought you were going to mention the part where he says that when he becomes Fuhrer, he's going to make all the women wear short skirts.
Who do
Oh
you think
man.
I am?
Lest we forget, lest we ever. I think hopefully, and I think that was in both
Was
incarnations
it?
of the anime. I think.
I think it might have been. It's very early in the series. I know that because it's like it's when everything is or everybody's still kind of happy-go-lucky. Nobody has died quite yet, and they're able to make lighthearted jokes for the most part without having to worry about any imminent war or anything like that.
Yeah, man, there's so much there. I mean, and with Maze and even Tucker and the internet, it's almost I've been inundated with those jokes that as you once said, Jason, a pained laugh. You're like, oh, oh, and there's kind of that reaction. But I haven't watched either series. Shamefully, it's been years. I need to go around again. But those really are feels moments, very much so, to say the least. As was, for me, and I think I'm sure for others as well. And I remember, I might have used it on Facebook. I've seen it on Facebook and stuff, and they, that they'll either screen caps or from the manga, and it always gets me. And especially after you've lost someone close to you, and that scene where, and that's a great Roy and Riza scene, and I love how people can ship them and stuff and whatever, yeah, but like there's nothing, like you said, with Ed and Winry earlier, Phil. I'm glad that there's something there with them because they're young and stuff like that, but with they're in the military and coworkers and they're jaded adults. Like you're not gonna see overly rom-com or cheesy displays of emotion or affection, but you just see so much in that scene when Roy is I think he's putting on his hat after the funeral of Hughes, and he's saying it's and on top of everything else it looks like rain, and Reese is like it's not raining, and Roy says yes it is, and Riza goes so it is, and that's always going to be a favorite anime moment, manga moment, whatever for me, from anything. And then also for Fullmetal Alchemist again, like I was saying, when I was experiencing it around college, and your horizons are expanding and whatnot in terms of seeing other ideas and philosophies and religions and stuff, and so I really really liked you could kind of extrapolate it. You could say it's allegorical. I don't know how much was the author's intent, but I think definitely there is, we learn about alchemy, and we learn about the rules there in Amestris in the West. And then later on we get introduced to alkahestry from the East, basically their equivalent of China, or what people would in days long past would call the mystical Orient or something of that sort from the East. And then you see later the Ishvalans, even though they have this taboo about it, which is very similar to Middle Eastern cultures even to this day, with certain iconography and imitating God's creation and that sort of thing. They even have their own take, and Scar utilizes that to help fighting the bad guys, as has been said, and so I thought that was a wonderful teaching tool. I think probably for a lot of young people or of any age, of you have this thing, you have alchemy, and you see these fleeting moments involving the gate and truth, and it's all very esoteric, and nobody's quite 100% sure on everything. It's these unknowable things, what's beyond, and so forth. And so you have I could see in that world, you could have zealots of either no, alchemy, this is the way it's supposed to be, or alkahestry, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. And in reality, these things, that and whatever the Ishvalan equivalent is, they're not contradictory. They're all just different facets of the same thing. So it's just seeing different sides to the same truth. And I think there's a lot of course, schools of thought, theological and otherwise, even today, I think that would very much agree with that. And you don't have to agree with it, but that's something that really struck me as profound in the world that Arakawa created, and that I've seen, like I've said, I've seen imitated but never duplicated, and so I think that will really lend to the series longevity and such, and the parallels of the East and the West and the desert in between. You have kind of a Greek motif for the ancient city of Xerxes, and going across the desert. It's very reminiscent of the old Silk Road in our world, where there was of course trade and exchanging of ideas and cultures and religions and all sorts of things like that. So those are something that I guess off the top of my head I can think of, and I know there's more, but I'm at a loss for right now, and of course it is sadly about that time, but we'd love to hear you guys or anybody else, if you're so inclined, in the comments section to hear more, and we're always up for that. We're always up for future suggestions, and so on and so forth, because the conversation, it always continues. So thank you, gentlemen, both of you, for being here today, and thank you, listeners. As we're now heading into 2017 as of this recording, in addition to the blog, iTunes, and YouTube, I'm happy to say you can now also find our backlog of casts, and future casts will be uploaded to our channel on VidMe as well. So check out the YouTube description if you're on YouTube for the link to our channel there, and follow us there. It's a great site, and I'm sure you'll love it. Some of your favorite creators may be there already. Also, a new feature we're kind of trying out, and I forgot to mention, I think, on past casts, is we do have, for yucks and giggles, and because everyone else is doing it, we do have a Patreon now. So this episode today was sponsored for just $1 by Did You Know Anime. If you would like to also sponsor an episode of Who Cares About Anime, we've got links, of course, in the description to that as well, and for just $1, you can have your name or moniker up on the YouTube upload and in the descriptions elsewhere for having sponsored an episode. So again, thank you everyone for sticking with us. And I know it's been a while since our last upload, so we're going to keep on bringing in familiar guests. Going to bring in maybe some new friends, new guests, and new titles, and new horizons to cross, of course. So, but until then, thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.